or it's the fact that this project's 24 months long and I can't tell my painter to hold his price for 20 months.
On that same note, one of the other topics was who owns scope gaps. And I think that that's important during pricing. How are you accounting for that in your estimating process? What are some tips and tricks? How are you managing scope gaps? How are you ensuring that your subcontractors aren't leaving this hard line where it's like, this is where our job ends and this is where it starts?
I'll give you an example first. Low voltage wiring for HVAC. I didn't buy that out on 6 projects in a row. And I'm like, why do I keep doing this? And my HVAC guy's like, the electrician does it. And the electrician's like, no, the HVAC guy does it.
My HVAC guy does it.
And it's just, it was like this one thing that we kept missing. And finally, like, it just went into our kind of lessons learned bucket where it's like, hey guys, remember, low voltage wiring has to be owned by electrician, because we want the electrician to own it and make it nice and neat. Frankly, because HVAC guys duct tape it to the side of their equipment and float wire nuts everywhere. To answer your question, the way we typically go about it is we'll draft the scope of work for each trade when we're asking them to put together a proposal.
Yep.
Hey, this is what we are looking for from you.
During pre-construction.
During pre-construction. So, concrete. Hey, we got a main house and an ADU. Here's the structural drawings. Please assume that, the hole will be prepped and ready for you. Assume that you'll be doing this in the winter, so you'll need frost protection. Assume that, our tolerance on the top of wall was within a 1/4 inch. Like we'll give them the assumptions to make. Like actually we just did a slab, right? And it had to be dead flat. So we were very clear, like, hey, here's all the slab detailing. I want you to make the assumption that this slab will be placed within a 1/4 inch tolerance across the entire slab. And they're like, so, all right. They're like, that's really hard to hit. I'm like, understood. Like, but we need to set the expectation that this has to be super flat.
Yeah. Because
we didn't set an expectation on another one. And there was, dips and low points. And they were like, yeah, that's within tolerance, which, one could argue it's not, but that was the product of it. So we'll start there. We also are, when we ask a vendor to review or price a project, we are also asking them very clearly, like, hey, we'd like a proposal for this scope. Here's the scope. Here's the assumptions that you make. I'd like you to also just be very clear on anything that you are excluding. Please make sure you list your exclusions. And also, please, if there's anything within the design of this that you see is an unnecessary or a complicated thing that is driving the cost, please communicate that back to us. In other words, like, is there any value engineering opportunities? And by doing that first and upfront, you're preventing this back and forth of, hey, we're over budget. Is there anything that you can do? It's like, dude, I just spent 8 hours looking at it 3 weeks ago. Like, now you're asking me to look at it again, and we don't even know if we're going to do the job. Ask, like, put it all together in one shot. And we get good feedback where it's, we had a mechanical design and our plumber looked at it. He was like, hey, it was a big house, $500,000 in mechanical. And he's like, however, because we asked the question, he goes, you have some mechanical in here that is unnecessarily expensive. This particular unit is a commercial unit. You do not need to use this for this house. And so they raised it. It was like a $50,000 savings. And we went back to the engineer and we said, hey, what was the reasoning for using this? And they're like, sorry, that's just a boilerplate spec for us. Like, yeah. If we hadn't asked the question, we would have assumed that, we might have assumed that, hey, it's $500,000, and the client, hey, sorry, it's $500,000. That's what's designed. But instead we asked the question and realized, oh, that's actually not necessary here. Because like, to your point, like, none of this is perfect. There's hundreds of people involved. There's all these layers to it. So asking the right questions and making sure that you're getting that information up front. But ultimately, who owns the scope gap? Like, that is what you are being hired as a general contractor and and you're managing a job, that is your responsibility. So if you're not vetting your trades, in these proposals, ultimately that responsibility falls on you. Now, there's points in time where it's, the trade might be doing something in a way that like knowingly screws you. That's different. Ultimately, most of the time we're working with trades that understand what we're doing, and they might make a mistake, and it might be a fair mistake. You'll deal with that on a case by case basis. But to get ahead of it is you are working through this stuff, with them and setting the expectation, just like the client is setting expectation with you. You got to trickle that down to all the parties.
Yeah, I think it's important. One, the communication with your subcontractors from the outset. So for me, when we go to initially for the first round of budgeting during pre-construction, it's giving them a loose scope, providing them with the plans. I know they're not looking at that shit. Like they're not spending time on it. They're kind of throwing a number at that. I understand that. And that's based on me. That's based on the amount of work that I subcontract. I have great relationships with my subs, but I don't keep them extremely busy all the time. So I have to understand when I put something on their plate, I may not be their first priority. And then when we go to do job walks, it's having a full written scope for them to go over, and then walking those jobs and asking them, what do I need to look out for? What am I missing? What do you see as potential issues, pitfalls? Having those conversations, and again, trying to capture some of those scope gaps. For certain subs, I know, and it's not necessarily scope gap. At times it is, but also it can be like if I'm trying to hit a level of quality and I know that subcontractor doesn't have the bandwidth to do that, I'm capturing an additional cost for me to either self-perform or manage that work to get us to that. If it's 95%, 97%, where typically that sub's getting me to 90. And I know that there's going to be some things that I'm going to have to go in order to meet my client's expectations that I've sold them on. So I'll have an additional fee in there to either cover my time to self-perform or manage the either gaps in scope or gaps in quality for a specific job. Like I know with drywall, that my drywallers are only going to get me to a certain point. With demo, they're only going to get me to a certain point. I'm still going to have to go in. I'm still going to have to remove nails. There's going to be stuff that I have to clean up. Yeah, it'll be 90% there. But I learned quickly that like I still have to do the site protection. Right. That's just something that if I'm paying them to do, it's not going to be up to what I need and what my clients are hiring me for. I know that I'm going to have to go through and clean extra. I'm going to have to be pulling extra and all of this stuff is just from learning. And then I'm tacking time and costs onto that job, whether it's through my markup on the sub or if like I just have a separate supervisory or management fee in order to get from the 90 to the 95% that my clients want.
It's crazy, like site protection. So we have site protection broken in our budget as material, labor, and then we also carry a general labor allowance. And that general
even breakdown, like
well, that's our general labor allowance, where it's like we just bake in like, hey, general labor, so we can bill against something. We also have like a miscellaneous reimbursables line. It's like, hey, these are allowances. We're going to run into things. We're going to need, we might need a saw for the job. Like it will bill against that. But you're going back to expectation. A friend of mine is going through a renovation right now. And he was like, hey, I got to show you this photo. Like it's going to make you throw up. And I was like, what? He goes, it's just, I know the stuff you build and I want to show you what we're dealing with our renovation. And he was showing me something, like one thing, but all I saw, I was like, are your floors done? He goes, what do you mean? I'm like, are those finished floors? He goes, yeah. I'm like, oh. He goes, oh, I know they're filthy. There's paint all over them. And I'm like, are they not protected? And he goes, no. I'm like,
or when they use the flooring boxes for the site protection.
That would have been better than what I'm looking at. I'm like, I'm not going to use his name. I was like, man, like I was like, I was actually kind of an asshole. I was like, hey, I want to show you something. I want to show you something. I show him, I show him our job, and it's like the floor protection's like perfectly like cut and fit around
It's like a
the entire.
Christmas package.
Yeah,
Dude, I'm
and
sweating it right now that I have concrete poured on this porch and job that's not trimmed out or finished, and it's a deck. And I'm like sweating that I'm going to be working over concrete that's new. Because like in a perfect world, I'm like, I would have had that whole thing trimmed out, done, left the skirting off, got the concrete poured, done the stairs. But I'm like, just from a time perspective, my sub's like, it's the end of the year. Everyone's going to be pushing. I need to get this in. I was like, all right, I'll get plywood and work over it. But I'm like sweating that I'm going to be working over a concrete sidewalk that I have to protect, let alone like somebody's finished floor. I'm just thinking, I'm like, what if my electrician drops his drill? Just like, and it's a concrete, it's flat work.
right. Yeah.
It's not anything crazy.
But
yeah,
it's
I can't imagine.
right? Like it's like, why do you have $15,000 in site protection? I'm like, do you understand how much time and money we're going to spend on protecting this stuff? And it's like,
your floors are $100,000.
Yeah, it's like I don't, do you really need that? I'm like, can't you just tell the guys to work neat? I'm like, come on. Like, I understand that sounds reasonable. There's probably going to be 130 different human beings on this job site at some point. Like, no, like this stuff happens. This is why we carry this stuff. Otherwise, we're going to get in a fight when, my electrician does drop his drill off the ladder because whoops, shit happens. And all of a sudden you have a dent in your floor.
Yeah. Or it's like, if you don't want to pay for site protection, which is $15,000, then I'm going to put a $30,000 line item on fixing everything that gets screwed up because of lack of protection. Because it's it's inevitable and it's part of the job, right? Like, it's just, if you're not willing to pay for protection, then you have to be willing to pay for the repairs, because I'm not going to pay for them because it's absolutely inevitable. And it's going to cost you a lot more, and it's not going to be as nice as if we just protect it in the first
place. But Tyler, but that's your fault. Like, you should be managing your guys better.
Yeah, but it's like, at the end of the day, like, it's the same thing with your kids. It's the same thing with your sub trades. It's the same thing as, do you want me to hand this over to you 100%? Or are you willing to live with some imperfections? Because like, we live in a world of imperfections. We live in a world where there's a million different people. Nothing goes according to plan and mistakes happen. So I need to, like, if you're fine with me handing you over a rustic project at the end of the job, then cool. Like, the price is the price. But if you're not, then I need to account for just errors, omissions, and mistakes and crap that happens. To me, that just comes down to, like, again, client fit, right? There's some clients who aren't willing to pay for that, and there's clients who are willing to see the value in it, and that should be a huge red flag, or even just like an indicator of, hey, I'm ready to move along with this process.